Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Sally here. Welcome to the Hope Illuminating podcast, where we share powerful stories, science, and well being strategies. Here, isolation and despair can be defeated and a passion for living rekindled. No flashlight required for our journey, just fired up listeners ready to gain some guidance from our international experts. And today I have a very special guest, a guest that I met. I think we were just kind of crossing paths in the hallway. We bumped into each other, and I just was like, "What are you carrying?" And he showed me these beautiful illustrations, and that started a conversation about what we're going to talk about today, which is about using story and art and allegory in supporting children bereaved by suicide. Now, for the listeners who are aware, you know that back in the day, I was a studio art psychology double major. So the idea of using art and healing has always resonated with my soul. And our guest today, Ryan Abramowitz from Melbourne, Australia, has a beautiful, beautiful story to tell us. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you for having me. And so excited to be buzzing in here from the first few days of spring in a frosty Melbourne, where earlier this week I actually saw bioluminescent algae in the sea.
Get out.
And
Oh
I was
my
like, that is
gosh.
and it timed with the first day of spring. And so I thought this is a real sense of the divinity um sitting on the bay. So excited to
Beautiful.
be here. Yeah.
And for those of you watching the video, Ryan's wearing a beautiful sea-colored shirt, surrounded in his studio by many pictures, which I know from where I'm sitting look like whales splashing in the ocean, and just beautiful, beautiful artwork. So Ryan, I'm so grateful we got a chance to do this. So let's start with you. Can you share a little bit about what has brought you to this moment where you have a children's picture book on suicide grief?
Yeah. Thank you. So I suppose in some ways I was always the kid in art school and in art class in high school who was always just drawing undersea marine life and reefs and whales and fish. And I always had a deep love for the ocean. Um, and I suppose if we fast forward to when I was studying overseas in Copenhagen in 2016, I was doing my master's there. And my family had all be born in South Africa and immigrated to Australia, and that provided some challenges for my parents and for my dad, and transitioning to a different country, um, and he became quite held in his eventual depression, and so to tie the threads together, when I was studying overseas in Chicago, I received a call from my sister telling me that my dad had died to suicide. And it was hard to sort of make sense of what that meant at the time. But I remember when I was flying home to Australia to the funeral, thinking I was moving horizontally to the earth. And my dad was moving on a vertical axis from the land into the stars. And somewhere in the sky, I felt I was looking for a soul, and somewhere we had that like moment of intersection. And I've always kind of thought very elementally about things and in nature and in those shapes of existence. And so that's sort of where I was in my life when he died. And then eventually I came back to Australia. I finished my master's. I started working in the corporate world. And then it was during COVID when the world went so silent and things really slowed down. And maybe there was opportunity for things that had happened previously to find new pause into our lives. But I saw my dad's soul as an elephant crossing the constellation one night. Melbourne had the world's longest lockdown. I remember just one night just seeing this elephant in the stars. And like I had never really felt my dad's soul in that spirit and that way. And And then I did this drawing, and I looked at this drawing, and it was an elephant walking into like this sky that looked like Mufasa's, ribbons surrounding it. And I'm like, this is a broader story. And so I began doing artwork of an elephant walking from the reef into the stars. And then I started to recall that when my dad had died, me and my sister felt there wasn't material to support us in a there, there's not a lot of suicide bereavement materials, and I've always wanted to do something that combines my love of painting and I'm a writer, I work in communications, and my love of story. And whilst I wanted to do many picture books in my life, it just so happened that Elegy for an Elephant was the one that I thought was most important to bring to the world first.
Mm. Powerful story. I just have this image of you, flying home and your experience of that intersection and then the materialization of the image of the elephant in the stars is really powerful. Um, and so a couple of things. One
Thank you.
is
Yeah.
story. Oh yeah. Yes,
Just a bit of like
beautiful.
the elephant in the stars. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Um, a couple of pieces. First, there's the storytelling aspect of healing, and what was that like for you to kind of put you and your sisters, right? Healing
Yeah.
journey into a story, um, into a story format, and then what does the art piece do for you?
Okay. Well, I suppose with picture books, um, they're very accessible formats to make complex themes more relatable. And this is a story of me and my sisters, and I very much wanted to recognize and honor that. Also, in stories, there's a rule of three, and it just worked beautifully. That I've got my twin sisters. Um, they took the forms of the two birds because that's something they very much resonate with and connect with. And also just on that point, I wanted to account for mirroring all the ways we could move through the earth so that everyone would find relatability in the piece. And so therefore we have a selection of animals that walk on the land, that swim in the sea, and that fly through the sky. So any reader with the way they find themselves moving through the world can find connectivity and relatability in these characters and in their journeys from grief into light. For me, it's very indivisible to think about um, the artistic shapes of the book and the writing. But with picture books, you write the manuscript first, and so the picture book saw 22 iterations of the manuscript developed, where successive iterations were always kind of shown to psychologists, psychiatrists, grief counselor, suicide bereavement researchers, as well as spiritual leaders, to make sure that I was consulting as many different perspectives to soften the language, to ensure its widest accessibility. There were some really beautiful moments in the making when I wrote, for example, the whale says to his father, "Why did you leave?" And the dad says, "I didn't love you because I didn't leave you because I didn't love you. I left you because I lost the love for myself."
Mm.
And that was true for my lived experience, but also I wanted to make the book broader than that. So I changed the messaging to um, I didn't leave you because I didn't love you. I will love you always.
Mm.
And so to kind of ensure that sandwiched in this liminal space between sea and stars, we have three questions that speak to those things that haunt us when we lose someone to suicide, such as why did you leave me? Um, what did I do wrong? And have moments between the children and their father that um, speak to these struggles, and to hope that in the pages is something that people can take with them and learn that they are not guilty, they carry no culpability. Um, they are loved, it wasn't their fault, and to find strength in those sentiments and in those lessons. And
I
then
think
to go back, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that's so important too from a child development standpoint because so often, very young people, have a cognitive level of just feeling like they're the cause of everything, they're the center of everything. So that
Mm,
message is really important for them to hear and to kind of internalize. You were going to say something?
yeah. I was just saying, so that was sort of the process of just developing the manuscript, so that
Mm,
iterative feedback and review and consultation. But then I also studied a course in visual neuroscience and kind of learned how to really hone my craft as an illustrator and learned about um, how if you create a continuity of horizon lines throughout the picture book, it helps with the pacing and it allows the eye to track and flow, and how to use positive and negative voids to direct the psychological mood of the story, and how the color palette is originally a lot more stormy and there's more tempestuous lines that sort of speak to the um, grief and the state of
mm,
angst and despair and all of that shock, and then we come to um movements where it's softer and time has mellowed it a bit, and to kind of show that psychological journey of um settling in the way the paint is applied as well. um so it really combined so many things, and it took about 2.5 years to put together, and
such
it
a
was released on
thoughtful
World.
process.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. I also love what you shared with me about how you use ocean water in your watercolors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And also going back to that piece about the animals we choose and we resonate with. For me, I love whales. I was fortunate enough to go see whales a few years ago in Tonga. And for example, in Tonga, I collected a jar of water that was taken from the first time I ever saw a whale. And when I eventually start painting a whale's tail, I want to wash that seawater into the
Mm,
making of that book. I believe that with watercolor, so much of the beauty of it is to celebrate place and to physically and metaphorically and spiritually infuse the seawater into those paintings. Like in sort of my other life, I paint wedding certificates, and a couple who are divers in Boston found my work on Etsy. And so I painted their work with seawater from Australia where they had toured together. I just think there's something beautiful to
hmm
integrate, especially something as healing as the ocean. And so that, for me, that's why I express my soul as a whale. And talking about the notion of animal allegory, so my parents were South African, and so my dad was born in Cape Town, and there is water from Cape Town that is in the final sun of the book. And it is because elephants are these beautifully tender, mammalian, gentle creatures that I think so much of that I associate with my dad and made him such a organic prism to express the story through, insofar as elephants mourn their dead, they're very emotional beings, and also mental health is the elephant in the room.
Wow. Again, just layers of your process, your reflection on this experience in you and your family and what your father might have gone through, and just beautifully expressed in metaphor and color, thoughtfulness around the science. It's really incredible, Ryan. Thank you for this incredible gift that
Thank
you're
you.
giving to us. Now that it's birthed, now that it's been out in the world, where has it been shared? How are children and adults responding to it?
Yeah,
Where is it being used to support people?
yeah. Um, it's interesting you asked that question. So, the book came out on World Suicide Prevention Day, 2023. Um, and I thought by doing that, it really is platforming the theme even more. And actually, 18% of profits sold go to Australian mental health organizations. Um, and there is that really interesting process that for 2.5 years, it was just in my mind, in my heart, in my dreams, in my thoughts. And then one day it moves into the world and becomes this organic living thing that has residency on other people's bookshelves and in their own experiences. And for me, um, I've never had the experience of seeing it in the clinical rooms where it is
Mm.
being used with a lot of therapists and counselors. Um, and also, the thing about animals is they bypass a lot of human stigmas. So they're very easy to project one's own experiences of fear and catharsis and hope for resolution upon. And so the characters are really carriers of that. Um, and these psychologists and therapists have said to me just how much it moved people, the tears, the way the book is a stepping stone to them having faith they'll get to a state of repair. Obviously, it's an active journey all the time, but to feel soothed and seen and held. And so that's been incredibly special. But then also this book, it turns to oh, so it came out on World Suicide Prevention Day, which is in 5 days, and next Wednesday, Elegy turns 2. And in some ways, I feel like he's my firstborn, and I think that we've, like, done a lot of really incredible things together. Like, I've started to speak at schools, and become a mental health ambassador and talk about suicide, um, awareness, both prevention and talking more about those bereaved and trying to lift the stigmas around them and around us. Um, but also I've started to do workshops, um, and art lessons, sometimes touching on grief, other times, just teaching kids about color theory and watercolor application, but always with the idea that we can see ourselves reflected in the natural world, be that through botanical elements, landscapes, or animals. And so I've started speaking more in different platforms and forums and companies, but also taken Elegy to the Bologna Picture Book Fair in 2024, where I got to meet all these other picture book creators. Um, and that was so inspiring. And seeing other countries doing illustration and their stylistic differences. But then I think probably more suitable was bringing Elegy to the International Association of Suicide Prevention where we met,
Mhm.
because it's really that mental health care community that understands how this book, as well as being a very tender hug in needed times, is something that is luminous and a very vibrant, non-triggering way to foreshadow our own healing and hope. And really the way the book is a genuine addition to a space where there is otherwise not a lot of materials
That's right.
to support loved ones in this way.
That's right. Yes, and you started this whole conversation off with there's just so few tools. There's so few many things. There's so little research, there's so few people who are actually spending time thinking about this space of suicide bereavement, and there's so few tools to help kids and there's so many children and teens and young adults that have been impacted by this and like you just wandering in their grief. Some research that I was looking at showed that about 1 in 10 kids experienced very prolonged grief, lasting years after a parent's sudden death. And this also is like a domino effect. They start experiencing depression and other kinds of impairment in school and socially. And I want you to talk a little bit about how storytelling and art can be this bridge for children to find expression and connection and relief even when their grief feels so stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, firstly, art has this transcendental way of connecting with parts of our soul,
Mhm.
that can be very multimodal. And fuse with people's different ways of processing, coping, responding, expressing, but it can give us a language where perhaps language fails
Hmm.
in the spoken sense. Um, when my dad died, there was so much um, grief around what time denied us to have in the future. And for so long I wondered, why me? Why my sisters? Why my family? And Elegy has helped me to see why. It's because I have the faculties and nature to take what happened to me and put it into a series of pages that are where words wash with watercolor to support others. And so for me, art has helped me make sense of why this happened to me. And it happened to me so I could make Elegy and hopefully in doing so support other people. So it's really helped give a sense of closure to my own dad's grief. Um, and also showed me how we can all have our own elegies for those loved ones we've lost. An elegy can be a song, it can be lighting a candle, it can be planting a flower, it can be having a memory tree, it can be painting rocks. I mean, so many people have shared with me things they do to honor the loved ones we've lost. It can be a way of bringing us closer to them.
Hmm. Yes, bringing us closer in places where words fail. Uh,
Yeah.
what um, what what have you noticed since you've been sharing this book with children in your workshops about some of the unique challenges that children face around suicide grief, and again how art might help be a bridge for that,
Mm,
especially when caring
mm,
adults, are not able to, focus on the children sometimes because they're just in their own shock and trauma.
yeah. Well, sometimes I've noticed that some children have had a resistance to engaging in the activity.
Mhm.
And of course, it's always done in a very gentle and reassured space. But I think what this can do to begin with is can probe them to start thinking about that person again without the fear that it's going to paralyze them if they indulge the memories.
Right.
And to also help them see that in the natural world, we can feel the presences and the spirits of those ones we've lost. And so, an art activity that makes us more conscious of our surrounds, whether that's with reference to something in the animal kingdom or just a magnificent landscape with maybe that person we saw, we shared with at a memory, or flowers and how resilient they are and how they bloom. Um, underlying message of Elegy is nature's ways to heal. That's actually also a line in the book. And so these are all activities that I hope help soothe them and make them feel connected to something broader, and also maybe perhaps preview that the curtain between the living and the dead is more porous than we think.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, you've used the word soul several times about how the soul of you and the soul of your sisters, the soul of your father are
Mm,
represented in the animals, and it's just striking me because one of my close colleagues and friends, Sarah Gear, has done a lot of work in soul exhaustion and soul care and soul healing, and working with a lot of people in her efforts, in her research, that are bereaved by suicide. And they speak to exactly what you just talked to, that this that first of all, suicide grief and trauma is very taxing on the soul, because your whole world's shattered assumptions, is very overwhelming and confusing. And that soul healing and soul care really involves all the things you've talked about: being in nature, connecting with animals, connecting with something
mm,
bigger than yourself. You have a deep spiritual kind of resonant theme in all of the ways that you talk about this. And the continuing bond that you can
Mm,
still love your loved one and remember them fully, not just in the way that they died, but in the relationship that you can continue to have, even though they're not physically here. You can still connect with their memory and in
yeah,
other ways.
so it's just I wanted to just share a part in the book that I think makes me think of this. It's I'm just gonna hold this a bit, but it's a amorphous cloud
Mm.
of all the characters bleeding into one. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a soft watercolor mixing. And it really just in that moment, we're all part of the cosmic whole. Like even with this page, so I just it makes me, we're all flowers flickering in the
Mm-hmm.
fields, and our souls are with theirs. And for me, um, the biggest gift and surprise of the book is that it's brought my dad alive again in such an animated way. Like the making of the book, although it was very challenging at the beginning, it was in winter, it was COVID. I had to reread a lot of my dad's letters, and my diaries at the time, and almost agitate all that um, emotionality so I could engage with the material again
Mm-hmm.
for the making of this book, even though I had done a lot of therapy and felt I'd done the work. It's always an ongoing journey, but I'd really um, looked after my mental health, especially because I'm aware of what happens when it's not cared for. And I still do take a lot of vigilance with that. But by the end of it, my dad had become alive in the thing I loved doing most. And and now, I've got in my room, just I've got all these elephants that people just like give me.
I love
and
it.
and yeah, it's wonderful, and he's always with me in every elephant that I see. And so it's brought my dad um into my life in this very visual active way that I never had before.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Yes, my brother died in 2004, and there's a couple of things that show
Yeah,
up
I wish you long
periodically.
life.
Thank you. There are a couple of things that show up, kind of surprisingly and out of the blue that connect me to him. And one is shooting stars, and the other is ladybugs, because he used to call his daughter Ladybug. And so they'll often show up as they actually did. One just did at like 13,000 feet. And when we were backpacking, this one little ladybug. And I was like, oh, hi, Carson. Yeah. So connecting through these
Yeah.
things in nature. There's one more
If
thing I
he
want
was
to go ahead.
gonna, as
I
if
was,
you were gonna, have a picture book about your brother, what animal do you think he would be, and what animal do you think you would be?
oh, gosh. Well, I've always connected to this idea of shooting stars, so I haven't really thought through the
Mm,
animal piece yet because my brother was spectacularly captivating. He was handsome, he was charismatic, he was funny, he was connecting, he could really like get to know people in a very close and intimate way quickly. And it made people love him because he was so attentive to that relationship piece. And he did phenomenal things in his young adult life. And then, psh, you know, then the light was gone. Um, and it just left such a big gap for all of us. So, I kind of like the idea of him being this spectacular shooting star. Um,
mm,
I have to think more about the animal piece.
yeah. Or
But
botanical or landscape, but it's a nice thing to
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
it's an elegiac idea to contemplate.
Yes. He left me on the last day he was alive. He went to the grocery store and bought um Christmas cards for us. It was December 6th. And so this was, he was always the kind of person who would buy Christmas gifts on Christmas Eve. Like he was last minute for everything. But he left them for us as a suicide note in part, just messages around because he knew it was going to be hard for us, I believe, to go through the holidays without him. And on his cards were, to me, were rabbits. And I was like, really? Rabbits? Why the rabbits? But it was, I thought rabbits were going to be the thing, but they weren't. But anyway,
Mm,
there was
mm,
just a couple of rabbits, and it was like, to my dear sister. It
yeah.
was sweet. But I had another thought about,
Mm,
story, and especially stories for children, is that, a lot of times adults, we're reading or listening to stories by ourselves. But with children, it's often a relationship or even a community that is experiencing the story together. And what are your thoughts on kind of this shared story experience and its role in the healing process? Again, especially for children, um, that might be overwhelmed or confused or even scared by this kind of loss.
mm. Um, so I suppose it's a bit adjacent, but my first thought is, I'm 34 and I still love getting to bed every night and reading a picture book. Um, we're herding species, and a lot of picture books, more so where there's human characters, actually the book ends with the parents putting the child to bed at night in the
Mm,
book, almost as a as a precursor to calming the child before bed. Um, Interestingly, Elegy starts with everyone sleeping in the reef. It's a very
mm,
dark page, but
hmm.
and the elephant soul is just creeping into the sky, and it reads, his family was sleeping when he entered his life and left the reef of this watery world.
Mm,
Um, I've decided that maybe in the future I might actually do another book about an elephant's life. That would be the inversion of that, and it's a love story, and it's an immigrant story, and it's a story of sadness and hope. And it would end with the family sleeping in the reef where Elegy began. Um, but but I suppose before we go to bed, there is a really beautiful moment of exchanging stories. And I think in having a parent or a guardian or a sibling or a friend read this with someone bereaved, it can allow the book to um, probe conversations that might feel vulnerable, but could begin to open up more bigger discussions about the person, about maybe the personalization of what they went through in a way that maybe without the book it's not as easily facilitated because of the way the book just visually carries us along, see a family come to peace and hope and repair, and the way we um, wish that for ourselves.
mm. Thank you. You are such a poet. And I think you just think this way. You just think poetically. Um, so for our last piece here, what would be some strategies or things you'd like to share to some of the caring adults, uh, action steps that they might take or think or consider when they're maybe at a loss on how to support the young people in their lives that are bereaved by suicide? Again, it could be a therapist, a teacher, a mentor, an auntie, someone who's just like, what do we do with the children? What might be some ways that they can use your lessons learned from allegories and stories and art and expression to help children uh, understand their grief and find some healing and recovery in it?
Well, I think maybe evoking memories
Mm,
shared with that loved one, happy memories, or as I said, trying to encourage the child to conceive of them in abstract terms, such as a shape, a form, a color, a texture, a plant, an animal, a landscape, something that can start to be given form. And I suppose in the process of doing that, there's a meditation and a contemplation of the loved one they've lost. And I suppose just, reassuring sentiments that they're loved, they're held, they're nurtured, their feelings are okay. um, and that they're always with us.
Mm.
In the sounds of the wind, in the shooting stars, as you referred to, we can all find ways of feeling their spirit upon us, even if the way we recognized it has left. And so art doesn't erase pain, it reframes it into something that we can use to support our own journey.
Art does not erase pain, it reframes it. Yeah. Help us find a way to interpret or find meaning in there. And
Mm,
mhm. So I'm just going to go back and do a quick recap, Ryan, and then I want you to maybe read a few
of
pages
course, of course,
of the
of
book.
course. Would love to.
Wonderful. So, to the listeners who might be just tuning in or coming back in, I'm speaking with Ryan. He's in Melbourne and he is an incredible artist and someone who has deep understanding of grief and also the ways that story, connecting to nature, and artistic expression can really help us uh, move through our grief and trauma in a way that words or cognitive behavioral therapy or other kinds of ways of healing just can't touch. And we've explored lots of angles of this. We've explored your connection with all kinds of grief therapists and people who understand suicide and researchers, but you're also your connection to neuroscience and what colors and lines and different ways of living in art can impact us emotionally, and especially how that helps children maybe find a way through. You talked about a little bit about the connection through story with healers, looking at this as it being a portal into bigger discussions, exploration, and reflection. And also how, you brought it up a couple times about how kind of understanding this through uh, seeing souls in animals or nature kind of removes some of our human baggage around this and gives us more.
And stigmas and
Right. That's right.
biases.
And moves in, allows some more space for some of the nuance in here. It's just been a beautiful conversation, Ryan. And your
I
book,
felt the same.
your book is a 2-year-old child right now, so it's got
Yeah.
a long life in front of it.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So
And I
please
suppose so
share
much
it
of
with
my
us.
hope is that it eventually can find its way to readers all over the world.
Yes,
Um, that it can hug when they're at bed and they're starting with the very questions that are asked in the book.
yes, yes. Well, let's have the gift of your story now. Would you please share a little bit of
Of
the book with
course,
us?
thank you. So that's just the front cover. I know that the light's a bit
No, we got it. It's
normally
beautiful.
normally I get like a north window sunlight, but
What time is it there?
it's 11 p.m.
Yes, and it's
But
6
I'm gonna paint
something.
some frogs after this. Yeah, yeah. Um, all right. So I'm just gonna get to the page. And so basically it's in the part of the story where the children are holding their mother.
Mm,
Um, I'm just gonna put the light here. So it just sorry, just
you're good.
rearranging the
So for those who are listening right now, he's holding up the book and he's showing us the illustrations.
It was his pain that Dad wanted to leave, Wonder explained. It was not us. I felt so guilty that it clipped my wings, Grace said, but now I know I'm free from blame. Even with the piece of my world missing, said Hope, I'll find peace. His spirit and love are with us, their mother agreed. I will
Mm,
heal, Wonder said, as they planted flowers. I will fly again, Grace said, as they lit candles. I will grow, said Hope, as they sang prayers, and I will find strength, their mother said, as they watched the flowers bloom. When Wonder saw the stars, it was his father's smile. When Grace felt the sun, it was her father's warmth. When hope heard the wind, it was her father singing. When their mother looked at her children, she saw their father. Those who live on through our living, through the feathers of our flying, the ways of our walking, and the fins of our flowing. Their love lives on, through the clouds of our dreams, across the landscapes of our hearts, and in the oceans of our souls.
Okay, I'm not crying. Oh my gosh. And you know what? I don't know why I didn't make this connection before, but when my brother's memorial service took place 6 days after his death, I had no words to talk about my own experience, but I wrote a very similar kind of love letter to his 2-year-old daughter.
Mm,
Hmm. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So thank you so much for that. I'm just gonna let that sit for a second. Whew. Ryan, thanks for bringing these gifts to the world. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Sure. So I I authored, illustrated, and independently published Elegy under a platform called Narratives of Nature, through which I hope to bring many stories to the natural world. And if people want to reach out, I'm always looking for opportunities to work together with other organizations and individuals. Please just narrativesofnature.com, Instagram Narratives of Nature, Facebook Narratives of Nature, or email narrativesofnature@gmail.com. Yeah, and it's always really special sharing the book with others.
Great. We'll put all of those ways to reach Ryan into the show notes.
Yeah,
And so you can find them there if you're driving or jogging or doing something where you can't write that
yeah,
down.
yeah.
We'll make it easy for you. Ryan, I really hope our paths continue to cross. It just
Like,
is
it
a
was so lovely
light.
meeting you, and I just thought you had such a wonderful aura, and we're just so stylishly dressed, and I just wanted to come up and say hi, and I'm so glad that it's sort of like, led to these things, and please God, we'll cross paths again in the future, and we can talk about the animals that you sort of had a chance to think about.
Yes. Yes, you were a breath of fresh air for me too. I love the research conference. You have to work really hard cognitively sometimes to figure out
Mm.
what are they saying and what does this mean and what are we doing with this information. And with you, it was just like, whoa, totally different side of the brain is activated
Yeah.
here. So it was
Yeah, it
wonderful
was
to
a
see.
bit scary for me to be there because I was like really I felt quite out of my depth at the beginning because I was that everyone was a lot more you know, had sort of academic or scientific or medical backgrounds and sort of I was there with my book and I was like, what am I
Well, I hope you
doing?
felt embraced by the community. And I will say that
Yeah, I did.
that community has really evolved. I've been involved since 2007, and now there's a welcoming of a lot more forms of
Mm,
wisdom and a lot more ways of
mm,
knowing and a lot more alternatives to
yeah,
healing. So hopefully
yeah,
you
yeah.
you felt like, okay, I do belong here because you do.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 and there's also been some interesting conversations there, um, of some overseas translations for Elegy.
Mm.
So that will sort of take some time, but that's a nice thing to kind of be working towards as well.
Excellent. Excellent. So, thank you again. Thank you to our team who is putting all this together behind the scenes for Dave and Stacy and Chase and Elias. And thank you, listeners, for coming in today and spending your time exploring some of these themes. So, in closing, always open your heart, challenge your thinking, and take action to save lives. Together, we can restore dignity and sustain a passion for living.